3:45. Okay, let's get started. Wow, this one really has an echo in this room. Okay, so today's session is going to be talking about this relationship between Jakarta EE and MicroProfile. It's probably the #1 question that I get, whether I'm at conferences, I might be visiting a jug at a nearby user group, even within IBM. I'll have people come up and ask, well, what is this relationship? So I wrote a blog about it, and that got quite a bit of attention, and so then I kind of turned it. What's that? Oh, I was a little out of the picture, sorry. So, threw me off. Okay, so even at IBM, I was getting questions about what is the future or the relationship between these two. And so I had this blog, and I decided to turn it into a presentation. This is the first time that I proposed it as a presentation, and I did it both at EclipseCon Europe here and at JavaOne or Oracle Code One. Lo and behold, it gets accepted at both, and they are the same week. So I asked our DE for all of WebSphere to cover my session out at Oracle Code One. So that's why his name is up on the charts. I had to do all the work, but he gets to present it out at Oracle Code One. So let's just look at this question, what's next? Well, one thing that we want to do is have better conference scheduling next year so that we don't have this type of overlap. So I know that EclipseCon Europe can't change. We've got a contract in place. So this is not moving. It's been the same week in October for years. So hopefully Oracle figures out their game and they can move it to a better time frame. Just a little bit about me. I've been working in this space in Java EE, MicroProfile, lower components of Java EE with JPA and JCA. I've been at this for several years. I am from the IBM Rochester lab, and one thing that I've been finding is as I've been talking with various people around the conference, they're not sure where Rochester, Minnesota is. They've heard of Rochester, New York, but not Rochester, Minnesota. So I thought I'd show where that is. Minnesota is kind of in the central United States, up near Canada, but not quite. But then people have asked, well, what's known, what besides IBM, what else is in Rochester? So maybe you have heard of the Mayo Clinic. So the Mayo Clinic, it's a national, well, world-renowned medical facility, and that started in Rochester, Minnesota. Back in JavaOne 2015, Ian and I, we actually did a joint session at JavaOne, and we asked this question: is Java EE, is it still relevant, or is it an elephant? And the idea behind that is we didn't know what was happening with Java EE. We did not see the progress that we expected to see. Java EE8, of course, wasn't out yet, wasn't even defined yet at that time. And, we just didn't see the activity, so we didn't know what was really happening, and we knew microservices was really taking off, and what are we going to do from an enterprise Java perspective? So that was the end of 2015, because September, October timeframe. Early in 2016, it was at Devoxx UK, and a few of us got together and started talking about this problem. So what are we going to do about supporting microservices in an enterprise Java space? The thing that we came up with was MicroProfile. We actually came up with the name, if you were at my earlier talk, Jakarta came a little bit later. MicroProfile, we actually came up with the name first before we actually defined the content. We knew we wanted to support microservices. So it's a microservices profile is what we thought of at the time. We knew that this new community, we needed it to be, or this new project, we needed it to be community driven. We need people to participate. We didn't want one particular vendor or person to be driving the effort. We wanted a joint community effort, have it very transparent, very open, open conversations, open forums, open discussions. And I think, overall, we have accomplished that. The other key thing is we decided we didn't want reference implementations. We knew we wanted to do specifications, APIs, and TCKs, but we didn't want to have a single reference implementation that all the vendors would have to participate in creation and support of. So what that really means is that as we develop a specification, maybe Red Hat is driving one of the specifications, and so they develop a compatible implementation using Wildfly or Thorntail now. That's just fine. And then maybe IBM is leading another specification and we do a compatible implementation in Open Liberty. That's what we decided was okay. We didn't want to have a single reference implementation. And the other key thing is we wanted more nimble iterative processing. We were used to Java EE. It took years for a new platform to come out. It took years for a component release. I mean, even like a maintenance release, it would take years to go through that whole process. And we didn't want that, for one thing, because it takes so much time and resource. But microservices was moving so quickly, there's no way that we'd be able to start to catch up if we didn't have a more nimble process. So those were the three key characteristics that we were driving for with MicroProfile. So if you remember, we talked about it early 2016 at DevOps UK. I think that's February, March timeframe. By September of that year, we had determined as a team, we're going to announce MicroProfile 1.0, and what better location to do it than at JavaOne. So that's what we wanted to do at JavaOne. Of course, none of our sessions got accepted. So we weren't able to go in and actually have a session that announced it. As a community, we had to actually rent another room at another hotel, and we passed out cards, and we said, hey, we're going to have a little announcement, come on over, and, we're going to announce this MicroProfile 1.0. We had a very good turnout. Now, maybe it was because we also offered a free lunch at the hotel, I don't know, but we had about 120 people show up, and so we saw an interest. That really helped us continue because we really didn't know. I mean, we knew as vendors we needed to do something, but it was very good to get that input from the customers. So at that time, all that we defined MicroProfile were these three features out of Java EE, the CDI, JAX-RS, and JSON-P. And that was it. That we said that's the minimum that you need to create a microservice. Okay, now, flash forward 2 years. 2 years, just pretty small time frame. Just last week, we announced MicroProfile 2.1. That's our 7th platform release in 2 years, and 17th component release with OpenTracing 1.2. Now, from our perspective, that's pretty impressive in a 2-year time frame to get out that many revs of different specifications, updates to TCKs, updates to the APIs, and compatible implementations. The only way that we can mark a specification as being complete is if we have a compatible implementation that passes the TCK. So this, from our perspective, is pretty impressive for MicroProfile. We still have some things on our backlog. I mean, we're not done. We've got other things that we're working on. We've got some reactive work that we're doing. We're looking at how does MicroProfile fit in with a service mesh or Istio. There's some stuff being done with concurrency. There's stuff being done. There was a session earlier this week on long-running activities or long-running transactions, if that makes more sense. And we also have other updates for our current components. And all of these are in the works. Now, I should point out the chart deck that I will be posting has a corresponding page for every one of these technologies. It gives a little bit of background on each one with links to the project and links to our GitHub. And so that way you can look up more information if you want. But since I have to cover both topics today, I can't go into the detail on every one of them. So I've mentioned about compatible implementations. You'll see that we have over 10 various compatible implementations. Yes? Oh, I saw John back there pointing. I thought, okay, what's he pointing at? I'm sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so the compatible implementations, this is what I was saying, we don't have reference implementations. The URL that's at the bottom of this page, if you go out there, you can see the exact version with links to every compatible implementation for the corresponding component releases as well as the platform releases. And the page goes on for quite a while because of all of this activity from all of these groups that are supporting MicroProfile. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit about MicroProfile. Now I got to talk a little bit about Jakarta EE before I start, talking about the relationship between the two. So if you remember, Java, well, our discussions with MicroProfile kind of started late 2015, but really took off in 2016. 2017, Oracle is kind of seeing the light. They're seeing all the activity with MicroProfile. They see all these vendors jumping on board with it. They're seeing the progress that we're making with MicroProfile, and they're kind of saying, okay, we got to do something different with Java EE. So they approached a few of us vendors and said, what would you think if we went open source with Java EE? And it was like we just said, wonderful. I mean, we have been wanting to get Java EE out of Oracle's tight grip for a long time. So for them to propose this, we thought it was just a fantastic idea. Now, if you've been listening to the various sessions this week, this is not an easy task. Going from basically, I shouldn't say proprietary, but there's a lot of proprietary tooling, and the TCK was proprietary. There's a lot of proprietary information along with some of the community-driven stuff from Java EE that has to move into this new Eclipse space with Jakarta EE, and it takes quite a bit of time. The thing that we're working on is we got to get all of our projects within Java EE, move them over to Eclipse, and get them through the process. You'll notice that we're doing pretty good. Most of the projects are at 80%. What that means is the projects have all been provisioned, all the code has been moved over, we are able to build it, we're able to test it. But what we haven't done in most cases yet is doing an Eclipse review or an Eclipse release. And there is a process associated with that. You'll see that we have a few of them that have made that milestone. Several of those were existing Eclipse projects. So they knew how to do an Eclipse release, like Yasin with JSON-B, JSON-P, and Eclipse Link. But you also notice there's two other ones, JaxRS and Servlet, and they have figured out all the process in order to do a release within Eclipse. Now, in order to do the release, one of the things that we need is a CI/CD pipeline. And this has been a major piece of work for us. Every one of those projects that I just had up there, 39 of them, every one of them probably have 3 or 4 repositories, GitHub repositories. And every one of those needs a Jenkins pipeline in order to do nightly builds and then do release builds. I am really impressed with the progress, and I know Dimitri is the one from Oracle. He's the one that's been driving a lot of this work, but it really is a community effort where multiple teams, multiple people are involved. And when I was first, I had this as a holding spot in my chart deck, and when I was first putting this together about 2 weeks ago, that right up there, get the light right there, the number done, that says 81. When I first put this chart together, it said 5. Okay, that was just like 2 weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks ago. Okay, so this is 81. I did this cut and paste last Friday before I got on the plane, and I thought just this morning, I thought, well, where are we at now? You can see we're 98, and we're down to just one more to do over here that needs to be assigned. So we're making fantastic progress on getting this complete. So you're kind of wondering, well, what does this really have to do with the whole process? Well, the big thing here, we want to get Eclipse Glassfish out, and we want it to be Java EE8 compliant. And in order to do that, we want to make sure that we are building with everything within Eclipse. So we want all of these components, all of those components and all those repositories to be building Eclipse artifacts so that we can build Eclipse Glassfish. So just this past weekend, we got the RC1 out for Eclipse Glassfish 5.1. And from our perspective, that was a major accomplishment to have that ready. Now, we still have to complete the rest of these CI/CD tasks. And then we'll continue. I would guess we're probably going to have several RC candidates before this is actually done. But we're making progress on making a final Eclipse Glassfish 5.1. The other thing that's been taking up quite a bit of our time is defining a new specification process. So since we're kind of taking over for the JCP, we need something that is more stringent than basically what we do with MicroProfile. Ours is, you'll find out in a little bit, ours is a little bit more loose. But Jakarta EE, they need a more defined process. There's more to own in this case. And so we need a process that will be a little bit closer to what the JCP had defined. We have a public draft available. I would really urge everybody, if you have any interest in Java EE, Jakarta EE, please take a look at the process. Even if you're, if you feel like, oh, I hate process. I'm not a big fan of it either. But if you take a look at it just to see if it's something that, will or will not work for you, for our projects as we're going forward, we would appreciate the input. We're cutting off the review period at the end of October. And then we'll have to go through, hopefully, we're not going to get a ton of review comments that make us start over again. And hopefully we can, get those merged in and we can get a more final draft put out. We are lucky because we've got a project that has volunteered to be a guinea pig. So it's a new project. It's an existing project within Eclipse, but it has an implementation. So what we're doing is they are going to create a new specification project. The proposal is public, it's already out there. And they're going to try to follow our process that we're defining. And hopefully, using that process, we can figure out, okay, where are the bumps in our process and where are the bumps with the JNoSQL? And let's see if we can work this out. So the team has been very good to work with, and they're willing to get a few bumps and bruises as we go through this. We have other things in our pipeline, of course. After we get the specification process, well, I shouldn't even say after, because we're already working on these things. We have to figure out what's going to be our TCK compliance process. Okay, the JCP had one. What is going to be ours? The TCK license. How are we going to license that TCK so that we can protect the brand of Jakarta EE? We have to define that. And the specification license, so that, similar type thing. If we have people, vendors, projects that want to implement the specifications coming out of Jakarta EE, what's that licensing model? Because we need to protect the IP flows through this whole process. Okay, so now I kind of introduced both. A little bit on MicroProfile, a little bit on Jakarta EE. So what's similar between the two of them? Well, one of them is we're both, if you read our missions, they almost sound identical. We are both interested in microservice development and cloud native Java. Okay, key aspects of our mission statements. We both want more agile development practices. We've all grown up with a JCP and the headaches and the length of time that it takes to get through that. So what can we do better this time around? And we want the code first mentality. Okay, we want proven concepts, to get into these specifications. The example that I use, if you think back, this goes back a ways, but J2E 1.2 or 3, they defined an entity bean model for EJBs. That was defined without any empirical evidence that the coding would ever work. And that was just a failure. Every implementation of EJB entity beans from all the different vendors, they were not compatible at all. Look at the other half of that. EJB3 with JPA came out in Java EE5. Now that's a success story, but why was that successful? It was because it was based off of existing things happening in the industry, with especially Hibernate with JPA. And they participated in the definition of that spec, and that has been extremely successful from a persistence standpoint. Okay, so I'm putting this chart back up because this is what we kind of started with MicroProfile, and I think it still kind of applies to the Jakarta EE work. We are very community driven. There's a lot of different vendors and individuals, projects that are working on both projects, both MicroProfile and Jakarta EE. The idea of no reference implementations, as we've been working on Jakarta EE, we brought that idea over from MicroProfile. They bought into it. So the Jakarta EE team says, okay, no reference implementation. Now, do want to clarify something because I'm guessing some people are wondering, because I had mentioned Glassfish before, and it's like, okay, isn't Glassfish the reference implementation? It is the reference implementation for Java EE8. We have to get that up and running within Eclipse so that we have a Java EE8 reference implementation to match, okay? After that point, when we start defining additional Jakarta EE9 or individual components, Glassfish, maybe it will be around, and still in use, but maybe we'll use Wildfly or Thorntail as an implementation. Okay, so that's going forward, but we need Glassfish to be Java EE8 compliant. And the other item here, the lightweight iterative processes. We know that we cannot have Jakarta EE move as fast as what we've been doing with MicroProfile. Absolutely understand that, but we do need it quicker than what we did with the JCP and Java EE. So it's all relative, I think, is the way to look at it. Okay, so some of the differences, and I've already kind of touched on a couple of these. So Microsoft actually is a member of this, but I meant MicroProfile. We have had a very well-established iterative release process. As I mentioned, 7 major releases, 17 component releases. Jakarta EE, there's no way they could keep up with that. We are looking at maybe one or maybe 2 major releases per year. It might just be 1. Okay, it's a different scale. Jakarta EE is so much larger than MicroProfile. We have to keep that in mind. It's not going to match exactly. The other thing, MicroProfile was never meant to be a standards body. We never had that intent. The idea with MicroProfile was to innovate, and if and when something should become a standard, then we would move it forward to the appropriate standards body. Jakarta EE can't use quite that same model because they're replacing the JCP. So we need something that is much more stringent than what we have with MicroProfile. And the reason for that is to protect the brand. Jakarta EE is a valuable brand, and we need to be able to protect it. MicroProfile, yes, we do have a brand. It's all trademarked, but we are doing everything on the honor system. We've had implementations being produced by colleges and universities, and they come in and they claim that, yeah, we've passed these tests. We say, great, put your name on our wiki. The wiki's wide open. They can go ahead and put it in, put links in, and we just trust them. So it's all on the honor system. Unfortunately, because of the Jakarta EE brand, we won't be able to be quite that easygoing. I do want to point out some of the things that I see are showing that MicroProfile and Jakarta EE are not that far off. First one is a REST client. The idea behind the type-safe REST client that's in MicroProfile, it actually came from several of the members of the JAX-RS team. But JAX-RS was so far along with their Java EE8 deliverable, there's no way that they could say, oh, hold up, we want to put something in. So some of the team members started in MicroProfile and came up with the REST client. So sometime down the road, I'm not going to claim exactly when, but I could see the concept of the REST client getting merged into the JAX-RS spec at some point. I mean, right now they're at version 2.1.2. I don't know, it could be 2.2. Maybe it's something more major, maybe it's going to be down the road a little bit. I don't know, but I see that there's a natural progression from MicroProfile to Jakarta EE. I had mentioned where MicroProfile was never meant to be a standards organization. We had thought, okay, config, the MicroProfile config has been a very popular specification and implementation. So we proposed that as a JSR. This was before Oracle decided they were going to move Java EE into Eclipse. So we have a config JSR that is active. They've produced a couple of early drafts of their spec. Okay, but now that we're making progress with our specification document, or specification process, does that make sense to continue with the JSR, or should that effort now move over to the config specification underneath Jakarta EE? I've thrown it out to the config JSR expert group and they're discussing it. Whether or not they do it, I don't know yet, but it is an idea that they are taking a look at. The reactive platform. I've mentioned a couple of features that are being looked at for future revisions of MicroProfile, the reactive operators and reactive messaging. This came about because this team from Lightbend, they wrote a wonderful blog. I don't know if you guys have seen it or not. I would take a look at it. If you have questions about the relationship between MicroProfile and Jakarta EE, this is a very good blog. This was written before they ever decided, or no, maybe they did decide to move to MicroProfile, but it was just shortly afterwards. But they talked about their process of what did they want out of this exercise. And they were looking at Jakarta EE, and they were looking at MicroProfile, or do they continue on their own? They had a lot of experience internal, and how were they going to move this forward? So they decided on using MicroProfile. That's where they're working. They're working on these specifications. But their longer term goal is not only to get into Jakarta EE, they're also proposing things for Java SE. They're trying to get their Streams API supported by Java SE. So they are continuing to move forward. They would like to see it more in the mainstream with Java SE and Jakarta EE, but they're starting with MicroProfile. Another integration, sort of, if you want to call it that, or kind of a move, we have fault tolerance within the programming model for MicroProfile. And it's wonderful for having automatic timeouts, the circuit breakers, fallback processing, etc. But it is a programming model. You have to modify your code in order to get this capability. Well, there's also this service mesh idea and Istio, and they can do a lot of this same type of mechanism by no modifications to the code. They do it by intercepting the calls between the different microservices. Now, the only thing that they can't do is fallback processing because they really have no idea on how to do a fallback processing, so they can't do that. But the rest of them, they can actually do. So how do we integrate these two? If someone has developed applications using our programming model and now it's being deployed into an Istio environment, how do those mechanisms mesh? How do they work together? And the reason that I put this one up is because this kind of shows that, well, maybe this isn't Jakarta EE. Now, I'm not saying Jakarta EE isn't interested in Istio. I mean, maybe they are, but right now it's not. So the idea here is MicroProfile, maybe it's not all going into Jakarta EE. It may depend on each of the individual components. So I've kind of talked about the different communities. I think you guys have figured out I work in both communities. I work on Jakarta EE things and I work on MicroProfile. You see a lot of different companies up here. I even, my word slip earlier with Microsoft, they're up here with Jakarta EE. If you look here on the MicroProfile community, there, Microsoft is over there as well. So we've got quite a set of projects and vendors and individuals. I didn't get all the individual names onto these charts. I apologize if you are one of them. And so if you look at both communities, you can see a lot of overlap. And there in the middle, those are all the companies that are very active, or companies, projects, vendors, however you want to look at it. All of these are very active in the development of both MicroProfile and Jakarta EE. We all want to see both of these succeed according to the current time frame, okay? Now, even these other projects that I've kind of, shaded out a little bit, I could see some of them moving over as well. And as we continue to define this relationship between MicroProfile and Jakarta EE. And I want to point out, of course, both under the guidance of the Eclipse Foundation. So, I know, this isn't a defined answer. There was one guy I ran into, he said, I can't make it to your session, give me the, the one sentence conclusion. And it's like, I can't, because there is no specific defined solution for MicroProfile and Jakarta EE. I see it as taking some time. You can see a lot of the similarities. You can see how we are working together to try to come up with the right things, but it will depend on the timing of things related to config or fault tolerance or these other components within MicroProfile, and how and when do they merge in with Jakarta EE. But we are definitely working together, and we expect this relationship to continue to evolve. So that was it. Any questions? Yes. Okay, so the question is, the specification process, once it's finalized, will it be the same for MicroProfile as it is for Jakarta EE? Is that right? No. We have determined that the specification process is meant for working groups. And the working groups, you have to be a member of a working group in order to participate in that specification process. Right now, MicroProfile is not part of the Jakarta EE working group. I see it as a piecemeal. So items like the config JSR. Config could move over. They could be a new project under Jakarta EE, and then they could follow the specification process. But MicroProfile, with all of the things that we're doing right now with our 17 component releases and our platform releases, we're going to continue to use our current process until those things start moving over to Jakarta. Okay? Anything else? Yes? Okay, so is there any interest from the big cloud providers? Let's see, you said Amazon and Google, right? Not directly. Oh, okay, so I do have to close down here pretty quick, but we have had some discussions with them, with the other companies, but they haven't signed up to where they are actually signed up either on Jakarta EE or MicroProfile. There are discussions, but nothing firm yet. Yeah, so just to repeat that for the mic here. Heiko pointed out that Microsoft has done work in this area for Azure to support MicroProfile. So it's not your Amazon and Google, but they're a pretty good size cloud provider as well. Okay, so I got the hook, so thank you very much.